I went from making a pretty damn good living for a 23-year-old to, again, making $0. We bankrolled the company mostly ourselves. Short form video is the best way to grow. Whether it's Reels, TikTok, or YouTube, you will get new followers. The best way to monetize right now is long form video on YouTube.
People think, oh, I could just post a bunch of viral clips and gain a bunch of followers, and then those followers will transition into long form viewers. That is not true at all.
If you make good content and you're persistent, it will work.
If you don't take enough shots, you don't give yourself the opportunity to get lucky.
Things ended up working out for us, but I think we would have had a better chance. And advice I would give to people starting in news now is...
Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Wealth podcast. I'm your host, Andres Sanchez, and today I have Billy Carney, the co-founder of Roca News. We're going to talk all about how he built this company, what the vision and mission is behind this brand, and any advice he can give to the many founders and entrepreneurs that are listening with us every single week. Billy, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I like to give the guests the floor right when we jump in to give us a little elevator pitch on who Billy Carney is.
Sure. So as mentioned, my name is Billy. Grew up in New Jersey and went to the University of Notre Dame for my undergrad. Graduated in 2018, which feels like forever ago now, and spent 2 years working on Wall Street. I worked in investment banking before dropping out of the corporate life and starting a news company with my best friend and one other guy. And that company is called Roca News, which is what I do today, which is what we're going to talk about. And it's been a lot of fun.
I'm sure tons of people are in the position of in a corporate job that they don't like and they want to leave and go build their own thing. What happened and what did it look like for you when you finally kicked the bucket on corporate America?
Sure. So it was kind of, I guess I'll talk a bit about the decision and journey to get there, and then also what happened in the aftermath. So it was kind of a lot of people in investment banking, I don't know if you're familiar with the space, leave after 2 years. And it's like this, fast track to private equity or whatever people want to do afterwards. But most people who go into it use it as a stepping stone. I think for my group, specifically within the bank, like 80% of our group had left after 2.5 years. So that was kind of the plan for me. I was, however, going to try to do something a little bit different. Try to get into the venture capital sphere or go to a startup. And a few months before that, my roommate from college, he came to me with this idea. He was like, I'm starting this news company soon. Would love your advice from a business perspective. And him and one other guy, both named Max, and I call the two Maxes my co-founders today. But we started talking, one thing led to another, and lo and behold, we have created this news company. Funny enough, the starting idea was, one, create a news company that's nonpartisan, because the options are so incendiary these days, especially during COVID. That was like late 2020. It's like one channel is screaming at the other channel. It's like, what is going on? It just had to be the better option. The other part of it was make it a more accessible news outlet for Gen Z. People are so disenfranchised with the news, and that's especially true of younger people. But yeah, so that's not really an idea for a company. It's like, okay, let's just do the news and figure it out along the way. But in terms of quitting and doing that, so I was pretty scared when I was about to quit. For many reasons. One, I was leaving a relatively cushy lifestyle to make $0, kind of giving up a future that wasn't set in stone, but pretty laid out. And also, I also just, my bosses, a lot of people that work in finance, they're pretty tough. And I was like, oh man, these guys are going to go off me. It wouldn't matter because I was quitting, but still there was kind of this fear. But everybody was very supportive. I think when I went through the steps, it was like, I think everybody respected that I was taking such a big risk. And so they weren't going to say like, what are you doing? I heard some horror stories of people quitting and moving to other banks or competitors, and people just like freak out internally.
Man, I definitely feel, and I'm sure a lot of people feel where you were at on like, oh wow, I'm scared because I'm going to go and take this huge risk. And then on top of that, I feel like maybe I don't know that much, but like a news company feels like a very competitive space, and it feels like a very tough space to break into because all of these legacy players that have been in there. What did the two Maxes say to you that made you think like, all right, this is an actual viable opportunity for this to be successful? Like, what was the differentiator or what do you call what made you guys different that it felt like it was going to be successful?
So You know, I would say not only is media and news competitive, but even if you do figure it out and are successful within the industry, it's hard to monetize, like even after you get an audience. And we've seen so many companies. I mean, Vice News went under 2 years ago. BuzzFeed News went under 2 years ago. Even before that, it's been like Armageddon the past decade. I mean, honestly, it was a lot of naivete and just kind of having a blind confidence in yourself and your co-founders that you can get it done and figure it out because realistically, you come up with an idea that you think is amazing out of the gate. And I've fallen into this trap so many times before, but it evolves. It evolves quickly. You just have to be ready to kind of take it and run with it and change and adapt your strategy as you face different hurdles. In terms of building up the confidence for it, like if you do feel like you're ready in your life to take a risk and jump into the deep end, you know, and you truly do feel confident and believe in yourself, just don't worry about the other stuff. You'll figure it out.
And do you think when you jumped in and you started this company, you mentioned it's hard to monetize. What did it look like for you and the other co-founders early on when there was no money coming in and it's all growth? Like how did you go? Like what was that transition from the cushy lifestyle to the like I guess you could say now people say founder mode lifestyle where you're potentially sleeping on a mattress on the floor in an empty apartment?
Yeah, it was pretty brutal out of the gate. Well, you know, in one sense it was brutal. In another sense, it was like euphoric. It was awesome. Again, I went from making a pretty damn good living for a 23-year-old to again making $0. I mean, we bankrolled the company mostly ourselves. We picked up some small like friend investors early on, but we weren't paying ourselves. Office headquarters. I had moved to DC because both Maxes were in DC at the time. I rented an apartment with Max, my roommate from college, and that apartment was our headquarters. So it was like the main room, the living room, we just turned into an office for the three of us, and then there were the bedrooms. And honestly, it was a pretty crappy apartment. So like all things considered, it's like this kind of sucks. We can't really even go out to dinner. But on the other hand, like we're living the dream right now, doing what we've always wanted to do, start a company together. And honestly, like it took like half a year for anything to even work. So at times it was like the doom and gloom and the doubts of everybody around you set in. But again, you push through it. If you're having fun and like you do see some incremental progress, it's kind of hard to, it's almost like a drug. You just want to keep going, keep doing it.
Yeah, I feel, and obviously all of your news platforms sit on social media. I feel like social media, from a founder's perspective, if your brand has that aspect, it is like a drug. Like you post daily, knowing that you have absolutely no clue whether that post is going to be that breakthrough post. So for you guys, obviously being a news company, and I would assume it was a very much social media first news company due to the demographic you were trying to target. What was that breakthrough moment, big or small, that was like, oh shit, like we are onto something here?
It's a good question. So in the very beginning, we were not a social media news company. We were a website. And the idea was kind of to make like a more Gen Z friendly Drudge Report in which we'd round up like five stories from four different categories like politics, business, world, whatever, and write like funny headlines associated with them. And people could vote, like upvote and downvote certain links. So, you'd come on and just like see the top articles from that day, react to them and click on. And we had accounts on everything. We had a Twitter, we had an Instagram, we had a YouTube, we had like you name it. And we were trying to run all these things at once. And two things kind of occurred to us. One is that running all these different things is very difficult and you only have so much time during the day. I mean, we were three guys literally working around the clock. Like I would go to bed at 3 and wake up at like 9 and just hit it, keep, I mean, walk to the living room and get back at it. And so that was very difficult. The other thing was that it is so hard to push people to a website. And we kind of were like copying, in a sense, what other businesses had done. And we realized it wasn't going to work. Like we could not get the traffic. We at one point we started working with some people who are kind of famous on Twitter. Like they had like maybe 30,000 followers. So the idea was, okay, you write an article for our site. We'll also have this opinion section coupled with the news section. And they come for the opinion from these Twitter authors, and they click into the pages. But like even that, I mean, we were paying them like $100 an article, and that was still way too expensive because we just couldn't we weren't making much money. So in terms of a breakthrough, the first real breakthrough came on Instagram. And we had a newsletter at the time as well. Well, we still do, but again, we were trying everything. One morning, I don't remember if it was me or one of the Max's ideas, but we took a newsletter article. At the end of our newsletter, we had a daily deep dive on a random subject each day. And I took that and I put it on Instagram. And that was like a bit unique at the time. Like most news companies, every news company at the time, what they would do is they would put a snippet on Instagram and they would say, read the rest of the story in the bio. Instead, we took this, we like in Photoshop, I just typed everything up and added some like pictures, and that posted really well. So we started doing that a few more times. And when I say really well, I mean, we had like maybe 300 followers just because we told our friends to follow the account, and the post would get 20 likes. This one would get like 40 maybe. We kept doing that until the Reddit GameStop fiasco first broke out. And because I had come from Wall Street, I had like a decent understanding of what was going on with the situation. So I did a rundown that was pretty good and in that same format. And a finance meme account called Arbitrage Andy, who I think has like 200,000 followers. I think he was probably like 80,000 followers at the time, reposted it. And we gained like, you know, we like quadrupled in size to like 1,000 followers that day. And we realized at that point, this is something that can work. And we started trying to work either paying for shout outs or like shout out for shout out on Instagram with bigger creators. And that was our first taste of success.
Yeah, I those meme accounts, like it's funny to think, but they have some of the strongest audiences that follow them. And like people look at the companies that buy ads on meme accounts and different things, and sometimes they are a little bit sus, but like for the majority, these meme accounts drive a ton of traffic. And for you guys, you were just hacking away at what you already knew was kind of working. And it was kind of right place, right time. I talk about it a lot. Like you could be the best operator, best founder, have all the funding in the world. There always will be a little bit of luck needed and a little bit of right place, right time. So it's awesome that you guys have that kind of moment where you're able to go back and say, wow, this was the start to where we are now. And I looked you guys up now. You have 6 Instagrams, the newsletter, a podcast, premium content from your website. Like it's come a long way. But I think people like, at least I am, and I'm sure people listening are curious when you talk about going to bed at 3 in the morning, waking up at 9, like that early grind. What did your day to day actually look like? Like, what were you doing during that time? And while the company was in its early stages.
Sure. So at that point, it was like, and you're totally right. It is an interesting combination of like luck and persistence that I think you kind of need for that to happen. That whole sequence happened about 6 months after we'd been toiling away on this. I mean, we were still working 3 to 9 after, but on that like initial grind, most of the day. So so the day kind of started at night because the night before we would populate the website with the next day's news and get that content rolling, aka get it rolling for our parents to come look at it the next day for like 10 visitors. And then we would wake up early and we would just do everything we could to get it out there. So we would post on Twitter like 30 times, like, again, we had no followers. We were just like, this happened, go to our page, go to our page, go to our page. Same thing on Instagram. I don't know if you know Friday Beers.
Yep.
They used to have this, they still use it, but every single one of their posts used to be that meme style where like it was a clip and they would write words over the people like as they ran around. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we tried to do that with current events. We actually interviewed those guys, like, because they were partly some of our inspiration for starting the company. So we interviewed them for like our first interview ever that went on our old YouTube. And so we tried to do that. Those videos took like forever to make and they like kind of did okay. You really cannot copy someone else and like slightly change the formula. At least we found that you can't. That just does not work. You really have to kind of sit down and like take a first principles approach to it. So it was just miscellaneous things like that, all with the intention of pushing people from social media channels to our website. And it really only we really only started seeing success when we used social media as like the end goal of the content and made that switch, as I mentioned with the newsletter rejig later on, and just meeting people where they are and kind of like taking advantage of that. And we realized, you can build a brand directly on social without, I don't think anybody goes to our website now except to like sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up question. Like, have you completely abandoned that website strategy and put yourself completely on socials?
We have, yeah. Um, so our website now, you can go and like it's essentially links to download our app and sign up for our newsletter and a couple other things, uh, like business partnerships or whatever, but we don't use it to deliver news. At one point in the future, maybe that happens, but you kind of need to paywall news on your site to like have success with it as like a news startup. If you can post articles for free, of course, but that's an impossible business model. And now with I think it's actually impossible.
So is it tough to get advertisers or sponsors from a news perspective? Because I would assume that that's the main way you'd go about monetizing.
Yeah, we monetize in a few ways, but that was the first and is still our largest method of monetization. So it's been like, to an extent, we've kind of followed the trends in that regard. Like early on in the company, we, so the reason we tried to grow a newsletter, so when we dropped everything, the two things we kept were the Instagram and the newsletter. We kept the Instagram because it was growing quickly and we could use it to push people to certain places. And we also kept the newsletter because it was easy to monetize. So we would essentially grow the Instagram and push people to the newsletter. Biggest struggle. So once you have an audience, in terms of monetizing a platform, the biggest like hurdle is essentially advertiser edification, in that a lot of advertisers were used to and wanting to advertise on newsletters in 2020 and 2021. That was like the thing. Morning Brew was exploding, the skim was big, the hustle was big. And so we didn't really have to like convince anybody that newsletters made sense to advertise. We would try to tell people like, hey, we got 3 times as many people on Instagram, like it's the same exact audience. You literally just have to, we can put a link on our story. And they're like, no, we only do newsletter. It's like, okay, like that's crazy. And we still have this problem. We have advertisers everywhere now, but we still have this problem, which blows my mind. It's like these big corporations and there's no flexibility in the budget. Anyways, um, but yeah, so that was like the biggest. Sorry, did you ask about hurdle for advertising?
I was just saying, like, what were some of the hard parts about like getting these advertisers, which you kind of explained, like they were pretty set in stone on what they wanted to spend and where they wanted to put it. Has that changed though now down the road? Like, are you seeing more advertisers willing to advertise on your social platforms, not just the newsletter?
Yes. So the biggest shift I would say that's happened is that advertisers want to get into video, and that's like their MO. I don't know as much about TikTok. I'm sure people want to get in there, but YouTube is like everything now. It's really the new TV. As TV falls off a cliff in terms of viewers. Uh, like we started our YouTubes like 4 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago. Between the two of them, we have like 60,000 subscribers now, I think.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, we kind of had a little springboard, so it wasn't exactly from scratch. But I think that Max and Max have handled the content there as well as Drew, our video guy, and they've been spectacular. So I can take zero credit for that. But we, yeah, it's like everybody wants to get into video, and we're like already like advertisers are approaching us, and it's crazy that with like 60,000 subscribers, we're getting approached. On the newsletter, we needed like 100,000 readers before people would look at us. And I don't want to say that's true for every industry. I think news is relatively difficult compared to like if you have a specialized newsletter, but that was at least our experience. We do get advertisers elsewhere now, but normally we'll bring them in through like, the newsletter or the YouTube, and then we'll say like the Instagram's amazing. Then they advertise there, have an incredible experience, and make way more money than they thought they would. And then we kind of repeat that cycle.
And just out of curiosity, because a lot of people listening have brands, and we don't have to talk exact dollars and cents, but we can use me hypothetically. Like, if I wanted my podcast to reach your viewers or the people on your Instagram, what would it look like for me to inquire for something like that? And again, this is for the maybe hundreds of people thinking that they would want to potentially do that with their brand.
Yeah, sure. So In our process, we're like a unique Instagram account. If you want to check us out, we're at Ride the News, like Ride the Wave, but Ride the News. In that most Instagram posts are videos or like straight up photos. We have a text based approach in which like you slide through different slides and there are bullet points on each and you're actually reading. So it's much closer to a newsletter than like an Instagram account. So we only take advertisers in that native format. So you get like a slide that, it says whatever you want it to say. We'll give it our approval. So that's the format of how we do it. In terms of if you want to reach out, just shoot me an email, billy@rocanews.com, ROCA news.com. In terms of getting yourself out there too, though, I certainly wouldn't discount working with meme pages that would probably charge less than us too. Like if I were just starting, I mean, for instance, I think we have a big audience, so it's certainly worth it at certain price levels. But like if you're getting into the game, like there are meme accounts, frankly, that are run by like kids in India who take $5 for you to advertise with them, and they've got like 500,000 followers. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, go take advantage of people, but like you'd be surprised how inefficient that market is. And it blows my mind that bigger companies don't take advantage of it. Like, I don't know if they don't want to, they're unable to, they're not sophisticated enough to. Like, it's it's remarkable. And like you ask someone, like say like a Minecraft page with 300,000 followers, like, hey, can we advertise with you? Like, how much does it cost? It'll be like $10. It's like, okay. I mean, for an influencer with 300,000 followers, a company would pay, I don't know, like 10 grand.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, I think there's that, unfortunately, there's that thought of like, is it real? Are these followings real? And obviously you got to do like your own homework on the back end as
Mhm.
you're trying to establish whether it's credible or it's mostly bot or fake followers. But I do agree, like if you don't shoot your shot and try and reach out and try and pursue the avenue of getting these promotions, you'll never know. You can't just assume that it's going to cost you 10 grand. You DM them, and like you said, they're like, yeah, 15 bucks, and we'll post it on our story with a link. It's like, well, shit. If my product is any bit exciting or unique and you can't make $15 back, one, it's, does it really freaking matter? And two, it's like, what the upside here is almost irresistible.
Totally. Totally agree. It's certainly like a decent amount of effort because you have to go out and DM people compared to, programmatic stuff. But yeah, the bot stuff's a great point. Like you certainly do learn to spot it the more you do it, but it may take some trial and error out of the gate. But I think most people who have grown up on Instagram and like in the digital sphere can recognize that usually pretty quickly. Some are sneakier than others.
As somebody who's obviously very involved in all of these and understanding these platforms, is Roca more bullish on one platform than another for the next 10 years?
I would say we're certainly bullish on the ability to monetize on YouTube. And I think part of that is like what I was talking about. It's like the soup of the day for advertisers. Everybody wants long form video. I don't know if that will change in the future. Maybe it won't. With that said, like even if you're not fielding advertisers, the amount YouTube pays is like pretty remarkable. You get a couple videos to you get a few 100,000 views, and you're bringing in decent money. So in terms of sustaining our business, I would say if we had to pick one platform, that's where we would devote our time.
And now, are you guys on like every platform, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, or is it pretty focused on IG, YouTube, and the newsletter?
Right now, it's focused on those three. If we had, more people, um, or just a better idea of what we do with short-term video, which we just don't do at all right now, we would do that. Um, like get on TikTok specifically. Like I don't think it's going to get banned, but it is a possibility also. Like the ability to grow on TikTok's spectacular. It's by far the best algorithm for growing numbers.
And I'm curious, you guys are doing no short form content at all right now. Is that what you said?
Correct.
I feel like people listening might think that that's pretty interesting. Like that's one of the more popular ways to post on all platforms right now. I know you kind of said a little bit, but like what is the reason behind completely not going for that area or that market?
Sure. And this is definitely subject to change, but this is our thinking right now. We Short form video is the best way to grow. Whether it's Reels, TikTok, or YouTube, you will get new followers. The best way to monetize right now is long form video on YouTube. You can then make the argument, okay, why don't you post shorts, grow your channel, and then, you have more subscribers to post your long form videos too. In a sense, that's true, but we find that it really only works if the content is very, very similar. In that, if you post shorts, you get like 100,000 followers. Our sense, and this isn't confirmed by YouTube or anything, but from the people we've spoken to and what we see ourselves, you get 100,000 subscribers off shorts, and you start posting long form video, and it's similar content but not exactly the same. People from shorts will either see it and not click on it, or they'll click on it, be like, this isn't what I signed up for, and then click off. And that hurts click through rates, it hurts watch time, and then that kind of suppresses your longer form videos in the algorithm. So our sense right now is that if we want to build a healthy long form video product with a good, viewer base, that we're better off not growing that way. And I've seen it work for other people. Like there's this one guy I follow, Will Taylor Chess on YouTube, my favorite chess player. I love chess, but he posts shorts and he posts long form video, and they're both chess. So it's pretty, equivalent. And he, from a third person's perspective, who's never spoken to this guy about it, it looks like he's grown very effectively with shorts, and those viewers have transferred to his long form content.
Obviously, that's a unique one because of the fact that it can't vary that much. Like a chess short and a chess video, like there's just it's a chess video. So I get what you're saying, because that's actually a common, and I'm happy that you said that, because that is a common issue where people think, oh, I could just post a bunch of viral clips and gain a bunch of followers, and then those followers will transition into long form viewers. That is not true at all. The long form viewer and the short viewer are very different people. They're mostly not the same. And if they are the same, you better give them that same type of content, or they're not going to watch the other one. So I'm happy that you explained it, because I think that's a trap that most people fall into. So for you guys on the long form side, are you specifically focused on that We Are the 66 podcast? Is that the long form content that you all are putting out regularly? Or is there another form of long form content you're regularly putting out?
Yeah, and it's so true. But I think if it takes a very special strategy to make that short to long form transition work. But so that's about half of what we're doing. We the 66, which is the podcast and like explainers essentially of topics, like quick videos, like 5-6 minute. And we also have our page like at Roca News on YouTube. And on that page, we're doing on the ground reporting, longer deep dives. So those videos are anywhere from like 8 minutes to an hour. And we like longer live streams as well. We did a like 6-hour live stream on election night there. And that's more like in depth content. So we're trying to pair the two of those.
I'm happy to hear that, because I'm not doing obviously the same thing, but my thought process with this is very similar. YouTube pays very well once you get into the monetization world, especially if you can produce content that is 30 plus minutes long, because there's more slots for ads. So for me, my thought process over the next 2 years is, if I interview 500 people and post 500 long form interviews on YouTube, eventually they will start to get traction and people will start to watch, and it'll turn into this nice little business that just creates dollars for me, whether I keep posting or not, because of the fact that YouTube will put ads in those videos. And then indefinitely, I have so much content now that I have to post on all these other platforms. So my strategy now for the next 2 years is like interview so many people and create so much long form content for YouTube that it's impossible for me not to have stuff to post on every other platform, and kind of wing it and see and see if everything starts to grow. At the bare minimum, I'll make some money off the YouTube monetization. So it's nice to hear that you guys somewhat share the same sentiment on the platform and where everybody's headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's awesome. The amazing thing about YouTube also is you can post a video and it'll get 300 views, and then 5 months later it just shoots off out of nowhere in the algorithm and just starts picking up. And we've seen it happen with our own stuff too. I think less so with ours than it would with yours, because we're like news and kind of like current event stuff. Like that you can't get that on any other platform. TikTok, Instagram, you're never going to see it. With YouTube, you put something, it looks like it disappears, and then out of nowhere, you're bringing, $1,000 a day off some video from 5 years ago.
It's crazy. And for me, like obviously channel's still on the smaller side. We're still building it up, but my
No,
average
you get there.
interview, yeah, exactly. My average interview would get anywhere from 250 to 500 views. We'd have some outliers that would get a little over 1,000, 2,000 views. But I had my first video that took off and like
Let's go.
really hit the algorithm. And it was crazy to me because it's an interview I posted. And it's funny, I've interviewed 85 people now. And the only person that I've interviewed that's like a childhood best friend of mine who owns a cigar company, El Mago Cigars, is the interview that took off, which I think is hilarious.
That is awesome.
But it had 500 views in the first 4 months of it being posted. And that was it. I was like, damn, that's a pretty good interview, like for my standards. One day to the next, I literally woke up and I swiped down on my YouTube studio and I saw I got 20 new subscribers. 20 subscribers overnight for the size of my channel. It's like, hey, something's happening here. Next thing I knew, that video was getting 300 to 800 views a day for 3 to 4 weeks. And it went from 500 views to 11,000 views in a matter of like a month and a half. And it grew me by 100 plus subscribers. Like it's the best video on my channel. He opened up 3 or 4 accounts with different cigar shops all over the US. He had people reaching out to him via
That is
email
so
saying, I
cool.
just saw your interview. I booked like 10 interviews from other people in the like liquor space and other products that kind of match with cigars because they saw that interview. And like I say that because it's no other, you're so right, when there's no other platform that offers that level of exposure to the fact that that could happen to any of my 80 other interviews that sit on the channel tonight when I wake up tomorrow morning. And that is the reason why I'm bullish on like, well, why not just keep feeding the beast? Why not just keep giving it content to potentially go and push out? Because that's an example of what can happen. And that video still gets 100 to 200 views every 48 hours. And that's like its slowed down version, but it still has its days where it picks up and goes back down. There's no other platform that's giving you that level of reach 10 months after the interview was posted.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome. I
Thank you.
it probably feels awesome to have something take off after all that work.
Oh, dude, I was starting to be like, dude, does this stuff just not work? Like, is there just nobody that wants to watch this? And then something like that changes it.
Yeah. I mean, the first 1,000 are so much more difficult than the next 10,000 because like once you have the base, you of course get like the base amount of viewers you're going to get on each particular video up slowly, but there's also just so much more, such a higher chance of a home run hit. Like we did this series talking to voters in swing states leading up to the election, and they were doing decently, like I think like 10, 20,000 views a video, and then we posted one and it just went ballistic and like over 1 million views, and then all of a sudden the other ones start getting views, and now like all of them come up. So like you keep at it, you make good content. That's of course the most important thing. But if you make good content and you're persistent, it will work. You just, it's shots at the board as well as you said, getting a little lucky.
Yeah, exactly. As long as, and that it's a good point with the shots on the board thing. If you don't take enough shots, you don't give yourself the opportunity to get lucky. And that's what I tell people all the time. It's like, yes, there is luck, but you need to put yourself in the position to actually get lucky. And if you're not taking the shots, you're not going to get that chance. And I love, there's like this really good video. I forget, I think maybe Dan Coe made it or somebody like that. And it's 3 levels. And it's the first person, which is quote unquote failure. They throw one dart, it doesn't hit the middle, and they walk away. Then there's the average person in the middle that throws 10 darts, none of them hit, and they turn around and walk away. And then the last guy is the successful person, and they throw 100 darts, and the 99th or the 100th dart hits the middle, and that's their big win. They took enough shots to actually be in the position to capitalize on being lucky because they failed on all of the other ones. So I think it's a very important point to make.
100%. And I think also, sorry, I know you're about to ask a question, but
No, no, no,
just
go, go.
something I think is kind of interesting. There's also, potential fourth person who comes up and they hit the bullseye on their first throw. And I actually think that is a disservice to themselves. Not a disservice, like it's unlucky. And depending on how it ends up, obviously, you make $1 billion, you're fine.
It's pretty lucky.
But I've seen people, another company that I know the founders of quite well. They were also on Forbes 30 under 30, all this stuff. They hit it out of the park senior year of college with this idea. I'm not going to name the company, but they this meteoric rise, and they ended up dropping out. They raised a ton of venture capital funding. It was like this like this wonder essentially. And then the VCs came to them and they were like, "Hey, we need this to grow more." So they changed their strategy. They turned it from like what the app originally was to like kind of like a pseudo social network. Everybody who used to use it got mad. Everybody started leaving, and they didn't really know how to handle it, and they didn't really come up with good like sustaining strategies because they had kind of really really lucked into an overnight success. And they've changed what they did a few times because they had money in the bank left over, but now they actually just closed up shop 2 weeks ago, and I feel so bad. I think if they had to work a bit harder at that originally and build up over time and have more failures along the way, you learn so much from when things go wrong. It makes you so much more resilient and able to change. Just add that too. Like, it's easy to envy the overnight success, but there are certainly pitfalls there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the brutal truth. Like the overnight success is typically, like you said, actually somewhat unlucky because unless everything goes perfect, which we know it typically does not, you will most likely fold at the first punch to the face or the second punch to the face when the founder that had to bootstrap it or had to really sit in the trenches for a good amount of time, they could take 10 to 12 punches before they just can't get up anymore. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I think it's important to not look for that one hit wonder, like actually want to put in the work, actually want to have that grind, because over a long period of time, that's going to build the founder that you will be down the road. That's got to steer the ship when a company's not worth $100, it's worth 100,000, it's worth 1 million, it's worth 10 million. Like if you're not actually actively part of that process, you're going to have a hard time when the shit is real, where the founder that got to go through that journey and ride is going to be a lot more successful, in my opinion, than the overnight success. Yeah,
Totally.
and the question I was going to ask you was like, we're getting a little close here to the end of the interview. There's a handful of people probably listen to this that are passionate about news, want to start a media company. Like, what advice would you tell them? Like, if they wanted to launch a media company right now in today's market?
So I would say one, get ready for a battle. And I don't mean that to be discouraging. Like people are always like, "Oh, news is so hard," or like I hear it about 7,000 industries. Like, "Oh, that's hard," but that's the truth. Like people say every single industry is hard because every single industry is hard. There's a lot of big incumbent players everywhere. So don't, it's going to be difficult, but also don't get discouraged or like scared because like it's news. I mean, it's doable. We did it. Other people have done it. So this is advice that I would have, again, things ended up working out for us, but I think we would have had a better chance. And advice I would give to people starting in news now is pick a niche first. And I think this is probably pretty common advice, but doing general news is so difficult. And if we were to do what we did 4 years ago today, it would not work for a few reasons. One of the big ones, it's growing on Instagram is a lot different than it was 4 years ago. Do like, I don't know, science news, or even more specific, like AI's a little buzzwordy for me at this point, but do like news about lizards and expand from there. Then you become news about reptiles once you got 5,000 followers, and then once you're up to 50,000 followers, news about animals in general, and then news about science, and then general news if you want to walk back into it. Obviously, it's a very specific example, but I think you can find there's much more of a hook and like an impetus to follow an account that's very specific. Like if you go to a page, even if it's really good content, if you see them in their pitches, we do daily news through videos and posts, and we do this and we do that. It's like all these things are awesome, but like I don't really follow a page for a brand or a general overarching theme. Like I follow a page because I see a set of repeating videos or posts that are very specific to something I'm interested in. And I think a lot of other people behave that way. So I think early on, in terms of growing, it's a bit counterintuitive because theoretically you're reaching a smaller audience, but you're so much more you have so much more of a hook for that specific audience. And also if you can figure out how to market it efficiently and working with like partners and stuff, you're going to have a much better time early on if you're focused.
Yeah, and I think that applies to a lot of industries. There's so many people now on social media that when people say niche down, like be very specific, first people's reaction is, oh, but there's not enough people. You would be surprised the difference between 100 strong subscribers, followers, over 1,000 weak random subscribers and followers. Take that 100 and continue to build it slowly. That community will serve you so much better than if you went broad and just tried to get as many people in as possible. People make that mistake regularly, and I'm happy that somebody who's running a massive general news company even is aware of that, and telling the people what is the hack here. Find something you're passionate about, that you like, that you are excited about, because at the end of the day, if you're going to make anything that has to do with content and it's something that you don't like, you will fail, because you are going to have to put in a lot of time and a lot of energy. Find something you're passionate about, make content about that, and then monetize it once the audience is big enough. That's, in my opinion, the easiest way to go about building a audience around something that you're really excited about. Don't try and hit the millions of eyeballs. Try and hit the hundreds or thousands of people that are super interested in what you're interested in.
100%. And it's also, as you brought up, for monetizing purposes, so much better if you have a niche. Like for us, I mentioned it's a bit difficult to monetize general news earlier, and we monetize in a few ways. But from an advertising perspective, it's like, you get, it's hard for us to kind of sell our audience to advertise. I don't mean that like we're selling data or anything, but like, I mean like sell advertisers on the idea that our audience makes sense for them to want and sell things to. Because it's like, who are these people? It's just, 5 million Americans. It's like, okay, well, like I could go on Meta and I can go into their platform and target people. I can target 5 million, 30-year-old women, which is the actual demographic I want. Like yours is so broad. Whereas like, you know, if I sell lizard food and I go, I'm sorry, I keep using this example. If I sell lizard food and I go, to this lizard page, I'm going to have a much better success rate and probably it's going to be a lot cheaper. So I'd rather do that. Oh, what else was I going to say? Also, beyond advertising monetization, like if you run a page, that's dedicated to pillows, you making your own pillow and selling it's probably going to go pretty darn well, as opposed to us. You know, if we made a pillow, I don't think anybody would buy it.
Yeah, it again, just doubling down, like the riches are in the niches, the riches are in the
Totally.
niches. So definitely what I think people should be focusing on. I want to make sure that one, we can give people all the socials and places to connect with, which will all be linked below the video. But I want to make sure that I ask the question I ask at the end of every interview. You've had a successful career here, from jumping out of college into a successful industry, Forbes 30 under 30, building this successful news brand with your other co-founders. What would be the one thing you would tell the 18-year-old you if you could go back right now and talk?
This might not be good advice, but I would probably tell them to not worry about school so much and have fun. You know, like you never get those early years back. And there's like a lot of pressure to have a high GPA and get a good job and do this and that. And while you certainly don't want to, set yourself up for failure by, really underperforming, it's like your first job doesn't matter that much. Like everybody's like, you're a finance major. You got to go into investment banking and you got to work in finance. It's like realistically, I could have networked my way in after a few years working other jobs if I still wanted to do that, which I would never want to do again. But like, people feel like their lives are over at 23. It's like could not be further from the truth.
I love it. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, it's important to go and get a good first job if you can, because it pays well. But it doesn't, if you don't, or you don't lock in that big position, or that industry that you're in love with, your world's not over. Your life's not over. There is still so much runway ahead of you. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I want to make sure that anybody that's enjoyed this conversation, one, can go and connect with you on any of the socials that you're active on, and then two, what are some of the accounts they should be following?
Definitely. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me over email or LinkedIn or uh, on Instagram to my personal if you'd like, I suppose. Don't DM us at Roca because the inbox is a little sketchy. You should definitely follow at Ride the News to get your daily news intake from a nice unbiased perspective. My biased take about my unbiased news. Other accounts to follow. Honestly, I try not to spend too much time on social media. So I'm not going to give any other accounts besides yours, Andres.
Oh, thank you. And then I'm gonna make sure that I link the newsletter. We're building a newsletter. I'm really excited about newsletters in general, so we'll make sure that your newsletter is linked below. And then we have the list of some of the other accounts from that you guys have. We'll add some of the ones that we like in the description too. But Billy, thank you so much for sitting down with us, sharing a little bit of what it's like to run a media company. I think this is the first news founder that I've had on the show, which is always exciting. It's like
Awesome.
a new checkbox. So thank you for coming, sharing with the audience, and providing an insight to what you do. I look forward to continuing to watch you succeed. And now I'll be a Roca News subscriber and follower. And yeah, thank you so much for just pouring into the audience and letting them know what it really looks like to build a successful brand from the ground up.
So, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. And I'll be following you as well.
Awesome. We'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good.